The urgent warnings echoed across the northern Arabian Sea. Motor vessel Tosca, vacate your engine room. After 6 hours of ignored warnings, the situation dramatically escalated. The crew of the Iranian-flagged cargo vessel Tosca refused to comply with instructions from U.S. forces, who had been tracking the ship as it moved at approximately 31 kilometers per hour, heading straight toward Iran. At a critical point, verbal warnings ceased to be sufficient. The guided missile destroyer USS Spruance ordered the crew to evacuate the engine room, then fired several rounds from a 12.7 -45 Malawian Quachas naval gun slammed into the ship's engine compartment, disabling its propulsion, a direct strike to stop the vessel in its tracks. Moments later, U.S. Marines launched from the USS Tripoli, flying low over the Arabian Sea in helicopters. They fast-roped onto the deck of the cargo ship and took control. The vessel is now in U.S. custody. According to U.S. Central Command, the operation was deliberate, professional, and proportionate. Since the start of the blockade, American forces have already turned back 25 commercial ships. But the real question is, what happens next when warnings can turn into gunfire this quickly? This is where things become even more serious. The aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, the most advanced warship ever built, has just entered the region. It was confirmed today that the Ford is now operating under CENTCOM after transiting from the Mediterranean and crossing the Suez Canal just days ago. This wasn't part of the original deployment, it was a strategic reinforcement that fundamentally alters the regional dynamic. Because now the United States doesn't just have one carrier strike group in the region, it has two. The USS Abraham Lincoln was already operating in the broader area. With the Ford joining, that's two floating air bases, each capable of launching dozens of fighter jets, surveillance aircraft, and strike missions around the clock. We're talking about thousands of sailors, hundreds of aircraft, and enough firepower to sustain continuous operations for weeks. So, ask yourself, is this still just a blockade, or is this the early stage of something much bigger? The Ford didn't arrive alone. Two guided missile destroyers, the USS Mahan and the USS Winston S. Churchill, made the journey with it into the Red Sea. These aren't just escorts in the traditional sense. Each of these destroyers carries advanced radar systems, missile defense capabilities, and long-range strike weapons. They're designed to intercept threats in the air, on the surface, and even from submarines. In a situation like this, they serve as both shield and sword. They can defend the carrier group from incoming missiles or strike targets hundreds of kilometers away with precision. So, when you see these ships moving together, it's not just about protection, it's about the projection of power, and the scale of that power is growing. And then there's what might be coming next. The USS George H.W. Bush is currently en route to the region, reportedly sailing around Africa. It hasn't arrived yet, but if it does, that would mean 3 U.S. aircraft carriers operating in the same theater. That's not normal, nor is it routine. That's the kind of naval concentration you see before major conflicts, not during everyday operations. 3 carrier strike groups would give the U.S. unmatched air superiority, rapid strike capability, and the ability to control vast stretches of ocean and airspace. At that point, the question isn't whether tensions are rising, it's how far they are willing to go. While the carriers get most of the attention, smaller ships are playing a critical role, too. One of them is the USS Canberra. It was recently deployed to support blockade operations. And while it doesn't have the size or firepower of a destroyer, that's not its purpose. Ships like this are built for shallow waters, tight navigation zones, and close-range control of maritime traffic. They're fast, maneuverable, and ideal for monitoring commercial vessels or intercepting ships that try to slip through. They're also used in mine warfare, something that becomes extremely important in places like the Persian Gulf. Because here's something a lot of people overlook: if this escalates, mines could become a major factor, and clearing or dealing with them changes everything. So, let's zoom out for a second, because it's easy to lose track of just how much is actually out there right now. We're not talking about a couple of ships enforcing a checkpoint. At this point, the US has deployed more than a dozen warships into the region, backed by over 10,000 personnel and well over 100 aircraft operating from both land bases and carrier decks. You've got two full carrier strike groups built around the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, each one surrounded by destroyers, support ships, and advanced air defenses. On top of that, there's an amphibious group led by the USS Tripoli, carrying Marines ready to board vessels or deploy at a moment's notice. And then you have the smaller ships, like the USS Canberra, handling close-range patrol, traffic control, and potential mine threats. And this is just what's publicly known, because beneath the surface, there are almost certainly submarines operating in the area, too, completely unseen. So, when people hear the word blockade, they might imagine something limited and controlled. But what's actually out there looks a lot more like a full-scale naval deployment. And the question is, how much further can it grow? When you really stop and think about it, this kind of operation isn't just expensive, it's massively expensive. Running a single aircraft carrier strike group can cost anywhere from $6 to $8 million per day, and that's just one. With two carriers in the region, plus destroyers, amphibious ships, aircraft, and thousands of personnel, you're easily looking at tens of millions of US dollars every single day. Fuel alone for these ships and jets burns at an incredible rate, not to mention maintenance, weapon systems, and constant flight operations. So, the real question becomes, how long can this be sustained at full scale? Because this isn't just a show of force anymore, it's a financial commitment that grows bigger with every passing day. This isn't just about one ship, and it's not even just about the United States and Iran. This is happening in one of the most strategically important waterways in the world, the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of all globally traded oil passes through this narrow stretch of water. That's millions of barrels a day. Now, imagine what happens if that flow is disrupted. Oil prices spike, shipping routes get rerouted, insurance costs skyrocket, and global markets react almost instantly. And there's more. Iran has a history of targeting commercial shipping in the region using drones, missiles, and fast attack boats, not constantly, but enough to keep tensions high. So, this blockade isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of an ongoing pattern of pressure, response, and escalation. And every move now carries more weight than the last. That's the question no one can answer with certainty. Maybe things stabilize. Maybe Iran avoids direct confrontation and the blockade continues without further escalation. Or maybe something changes, a miscalculation, a confrontation at sea, another vessel that refuses to comply. Because if one cargo ship incident ended with naval gunfire and a boarding operation, what happens if the next one pushes even further? And what happens if Iran decides to respond? At this point, it's not just about what has already happened, it's about what could happen next. And right now, all the pieces are moving into place.